Open world survival games I basically put into two categories. Those that have lore and a plot behind them like Ark Survival Evolved, and those that don't have a plot around them like 7 Days to Die. And when it comes to the story-based open world survival games, we actually got one not too long ago on the Switch, Radiation City from Atypical Games, even though the port of Radiation City really wasn't that optimized for the Switch, had a lot of glitches, and it did not perform very well. Thankfully, another of Atypical Games' open world survival games was already on the Switch, and it runs a lot better. So here is my review of Radiation Island for the Nintendo Switch. The story of Radiation Island is about World War II teleportation experiments based on the Philadelphia experiment, a supposed test that was done to an American destroyer escort vessel back in the 40s in optical camouflage that ended up having unforeseeable teleportation-based results. And if you want more information about that, I'll attach a documentary about the Philadelphia experiment at the end of this review. Now in Radiation Island, you're recruited by the Japanese army and doing similar experiments only on an island-wide scale. But when the Americans deploy an experimental ship during one of your final tests, you get teleported all around the island and wake up on the beach, only to find all of the wildlife extremely hostile and everyone else on the island mutated and transformed into zombified monsters. With only a journal and the clothes on your back, you have to find a way to survive and escape the island. The story of Radiation Island I really like because of what it's based on. I've always been fascinated by the idea of things like the Philadelphia experiment. I really love this kind of sci-fi stuff, and all of the notes and all of the lore that you find in the game really is just full of it. When it comes to gameplay, Radiation Island is an open world survival game. Just like in Radiation City, you're going to be exploring a huge open world and constantly collecting materials and crafting new items so you can build up your arsenal of weapons, gear, medicine, and food. Now your goal in the game isn't that different from Radiation City. You've got 15 towers across 3 island maps that you've got to go and shut down, along with all the preparations involved, making sure you have enough food, gear, weapons, and radiation protection when you go into those radiated areas to shut down those towers. But being an open world game means you've got a lot of freedom. You don't have to do the islands in a particular order, and you don't have to do the towers in a particular order. And actually, there's so much freedom in the game that you don't even have to play it as a survival game. When you get through the tutorial, the game gives you difficulty options, the normal and hard being the survival game mode options, but if you choose easy mode, it's literally just an exploration game. None of the enemies will attack you, you don't have to worry about your hunger gauge, you never have to worry about diseases or medication. So if you ever want to go through the game and just explore and enjoy the story, you can do that casual mode for that. But assuming you don't do the casual mode and want to play it as a survival game, this is all about finding materials and crafting them into new resources and new tools to help prepare you for all those tower runs. This is typical survival game stuff where you can pick up some materials with your bare hands and craft those materials into tools that you can use to gain more materials, and eventually work your way up through the recipes until you can make weapons, ammo, and everything else you're going to need to survive. Unlike some other games of the genre, Radiation Island systems are pretty simple. You've got all of your recipes from the start of the game, and if you go into the recipes, it'll tell you what each material is, where to find it, and what to use to get it. And to add on to this, the resources are plentiful. It doesn't take long for you to get a ton of any of the materials that you need, and not only do those harvest points respawn pretty quickly, but there's also a bunch of treasure chests littered around all of the towers and villages you come across on the islands that give you a lot of really good stuff, especially when you get towards the end of the game, and the simplicity and user-friendliness of the system continues even into exploration and combat. All of the island maps are very big all on their own, and there are 4 of them. Because of this, there are houses that are littered across each of the islands where you can respawn at, but can also be used as fast travel points. This is incredibly useful for popping around the map whenever enemies aren't nearby, especially if you get to a new fast travel point and want to go back to your original one where you've made your home base so you can get all your materials and make more stuff. And combat is simple because of one thing: auto lock. Whenever you're exploring and look at an enemy in front of you, the game will automatically lock onto them, especially if you're using a projectile weapon, meaning all of the pebbles, arrows, or bullets that you fire at them are almost guaranteed to hit them, which is especially good if you see a big meaty enemy like a bear running towards you. But even with all these user-friendly systems, the game is still pretty difficult, especially towards the beginning. There are a lot of hazards and a lot of things you have to manage as you're exploring. You've got enemies to watch out for, to be sure. A lot of the humanoid enemies are only around the towers, but you still gotta look out for hostile animals like wolves and bears that can easily hit you once and immediately injure you and hinder your movement. And apart from fighting enemies and dealing with injuries, you've also got the hunger gauge to worry about that's constantly going down the more stuff you do. Now all of this comes together pretty well, and you're gonna get quite a bit of content, at least depending on what mode you go through. When I went through my casual mode run, I beat the entire game in about 6 hours. When I did my legitimate normal mode run, I beat the first island in about 6 or 7 hours. So if you just do a normal legit run, I would say you're probably going to beat the game in about 15 to 20 hours. Plenty of content and length for that $10 price tag. When it comes to presentation, the game looks okay visually. You can definitely tell there are a lot of jagged edges here and there's not as much detail on the character models as you would expect there to be, but it looks alright for what it is, especially if you got it in handheld mode versus a TV. But the bigger thing you're probably wondering about is performance. Radiation City, a typical second Nintendo Switch open world port, was optimized very poorly. When it comes to frame rate, it's nice and smooth for most of the game, even going up to 60 frames per second in a lot of the smoother areas. Now there are a few areas of the game, especially enclosed buildings, that do drop the frame rate under 30 frames per second and make it a little choppy. The two bigger problems with performance are crashing and character models and environment models not really agreeing with one another. Now this isn't a clipping issue like what we had in Radiation City. This is more along the lines of enemies being able to easily get stuck on walls, like a gator being stuck in the corner of a building, or a mountain lion that's supposed to land on the ground but doesn't and ends up flying halfway down a mountain through midair. The problem with this is the fact that the game doesn't really know exactly where they are or what they're doing when they attack you. I could be shooting at a bear and it could swipe its paw at me several feet away and it'll still hit me and fracture my bones. It's definitely more optimized than Radiation City was, but it still has its own problems. Now let's get out of presentation and into battery life, which is very good. Radiation Island has a battery range of 4 hours and 3 minutes on high settings, up to 4 hours and 23 minutes on low settings. Now in conclusion, Radiation Island is a fun and user-friendly open world survival game. Now on the downside, there are some performance issues like the game crashing in some areas that make the frame rate a little choppy, but if you like survival games like this, it's a huge improvement over what we got from Radiation City. Reviews to Go rates Radiation Island for the Nintendo Switch a 6.5 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thanks for watching and have a great day.